As we look ahead into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. Bill Gates. And I think that's so descriptive of our speaker today. I could give you his pedigree. You can read that on the website. I can tell you all the companies started. You can read that on the website. I can tell you that he's a creative genius, but you can read that on the website. What I'll tell you today is somebody that stepped up, took on the entire medical industry, the state regulatory boards in all 50 states, to create a company called Teledoc, which was the foundation of the telemedicine industry. Having fought the regulatory battles, having set the stage and built the foundation for when COVID hit, for telemedicine to become a national reality. He's a serial entrepreneur, multiple companies, engineer, think of double E, I don't remember, a scientist. But most importantly, he empowers others to create greatness. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael Gorton, the founder of Teledoc and so many others, to our lectern today.
No, I don't need to be. So it's a great honor to be here. So many Texas legends, some of whom I know, some of whom I just recognize your faces, but it's great. I don't know, where's my slideshow? Can you, who's got the controller? Okay, I like this starting point because it really was rampart demolition that we had to do. And I'm going to tell you some stories, and they're all true. But I want to start with Kilimanjaro. So you can go to the next slide. The Teledoc was born on the slopes of Kilimanjaro. Hard it's going to be. There's as one of my friends before I went, and maybe I shouldn't even say this, but one of my friends said, okay, look, there's no air, no food, and no sex. Why do you want to go there? So, but we Dr. Brooks, the whole time we were climbing this mountain, was thinking about the fact that I had just sold a company called Internet Global and used that money to fund all of us going out there. And a big check came from a guy named Bill, who had been a longtime friend of mine. And he said, my only request is I get to be the first person you meet with when you get back from Kilimanjaro to hear the stories. So we climb this mountain. It's 5 days, 5 very grueling days, and it really is true. All of those things she said were true. But the night before we summited, so if anybody's climbed mountains, you know, a mountain like this, you don't want to be on the summit afternoon because there's a lot of lightning and bad things happen. And so you start climbing the night before. We got up at 11 p.m. It was minus 17 degrees. We went to the summit, and one of my hiking partners handed me something and said, your 6-year-old daughter wanted you to have this at the summit. So I look at it, and it's a little drawing of a mountain, and it says, when you wish upon a star. So, you know, as a parent, you get teary-eyed and you think, okay, my kid's getting it. So took a picture so I could show her. After this grueling hike, I have lunch with Bill and I bring my daughter. And so I'm telling him the stories and I show him this picture. And he got really quiet and he goes, did I ever tell you where I got the money to buy stock in your company that funded your trip? And I said, no. And he said, my uncle wrote that song, When You Wish Upon a Star. And so I think of this as kind of a case study, because all of the hard stuff that we had to go through, there's a finish line. And Jeff Crilly, in the beginning of this thing, asked me, you know, what is this all about? And I think success is about getting through these super hard challenges and getting to the finish line and having moments like that where it all sort of pays off. So when I started Teledoc, I had no idea what disruptive technologies were. Now we all know the term. We all know the term unicorn. And certainly the whole concept of Teledoc, that unicorn was born on Kilimanjaro. But sometime in the late 90s, there was a guy named Clayton Christensen who created this term, disruptive technologies. And just kind of as a review, a disruptive technology is something that goes into a market. It's typically a person who does not know the industry. Okay, I didn't know very much about healthcare. Dr. Brooks knew a lot about healthcare. I didn't. And so to me, there were no barriers. Yeah, we ran into barriers. We knocked the walls down. We got through them. But what Clayton Christensen said was, if you can change an industry and you have somebody who doesn't really know all of the, you're not allowed to do this, you can't do this, we've always done it this way. Those are the disruptors. And so some good examples. I think, you know, one of my favorites, the smartphone, right? This is a supercomputer. It's our camera now. It's our communications device. It's so many things. When we don't have internet, it's our internet source. Wikipedia. Remember when we were all kids and there would be somebody knocking on the door? Encyclopedia salesman, Britannica, you know, and so now using our smartphone from anywhere, we have our supercomputer. Digital printing. Remember Kodak? Poor Paul Simon, you know, the kids these days, you have to explain to them what Kodachrome is. So, and Teledoc is certainly one of those. So the Teledoc story, you know, I think that we as entrepreneurs have to choose our battles. And there's a great kids movie called Up. And in that movie, there's a dog. And every time he sees a squirrel, he chases it. And so he's going this way and that way and this way and that way and this way. And I was talking to Carrie Claiborne a little while ago. And I remember at the very beginning of Teledoc, he and I had a conversation about the beginnings of Teledoc. And, you know, how do you raise the money? How do you get all these things accomplished? And people, entrepreneurs, are very creative, and they can be like that dog. And as a mentor to entrepreneurs, I try and tell them all the time, if you start chasing squirrels, 3 years from now, you will be exactly where you started or worse. So you can't do that. You can't be the squirrel chaser. You have to pick a target. You have to stay on that target. No matter what happens, keep moving forward. Don't chase up every opportunity that goes in the door. But there's a military analogy to this. Let's choose our battles. And the military analogy is, you know, look at World War II. Thank goodness the Germans split themselves up and fought on two fronts. If you want to win, you stay focused. And in the world of telemedicine, there were two battles. And as we started making progress, a lot of people wanted me to fight both of the battles. So what were those two battles? Because several people this morning said, oh, I heard on NPR this morning a story about Teledoc and telemedicine. And so what were those two battles? At the beginning of Teledoc, one of them was Interstate Medicine. So I always like to joke around. The chairman of my current board is from Oklahoma. And so it's great for me to say, okay, can a doctor in Oklahoma really treat a Texas patient? So, or vice versa, those guys up there are the same. So interstate medicine is a really interesting question because, we're all humans. A doctor in Texas should be able to treat somebody in New York or wherever. But medicine is regulated by the boards of medical examiners. And these are 50 little fiefdoms that are truly judge, jury, and executioner. They have their own court system and their own judges. If you are a doctor and they don't like what you're doing, you're done. You don't win. And so thinking about practicing medicine across state lines. So in the legal profession, we have something called reciprocity. So Andrew could use his legal knowledge and do something to help somebody in Oklahoma. But in medicine, you can't use your medical knowledge and treat a patient in Oklahoma. And so that was one of the battles, interstate medicine. That wall came down during COVID, maybe temporarily. The other one is it appropriate for a physician to treat a patient they've never touched? And that was the battle I decided to take on at Teledoc, because I felt like I'm never going to win the battle against the boards of medical examiners. Will a Texas board allow an Oklahoma physician to treat a Texan? I did not think I could win that battle. And so I maintained my focus. I didn't chase squirrels. We stayed. And as we started making progress in Teledoc, a lot of people started saying, oh, can we fight this other battle? And people on my staff wanted to fight the other battle. The answer was always no. So the investors of the world always ask those of us who are entrepreneurs. I used to think this was a trick question. Now I know the value of this question, but what keeps you awake at night? As an entrepreneur, I mean, before Teledoc, nothing kept me awake up at night. I'm like, okay, full speed ahead, let's go get it. And but suddenly, as we were building Teledoc, things kept me awake at night. And so I'll go back to Carrie again, because the reason I sat down with Carrie Claiborne in the beginning is I said, I've got to build this thing and I don't know how to fund it. And what I found was, okay, I just built a company that I sold for $122 million. I made a lot of people a lot of money, and nobody would fund Teledoc. People were scared of it. And so we started Teledoc on me pulling favors with former employees from Internet Global and putting a dime in here and a quarter in there. When I think about at the beginning of Teledoc, nothing existed. Nowadays, there's national networks of doctors, there's electronic medical records, there's call centers, there's all these things that didn't exist. We had to build every single one of them, and we built all of them for less than $1 million. And it was because we cleaned the toilets, we did the programming, we did the negotiating of the $1 million deals. We were true entrepreneurs, and because nobody would do anything. And I got the question that another one that entrepreneurs always get in the beginning, when I would tell the story about, this is such a great idea, it's going to change medicine forever. And people would say to me, if it was such a great idea, then United or Aetna or Blue Cross would do it. So it can't be that great of an idea. The big one is this one. So 2.5 years into Teledoc, we've got a running system. We've tested it on a couple of hundred members. Everybody loves it. So Dr. Brooks, so he's the one with the real credentials. This guy is an electrical engineer, MD. He sat at NASA as a flight surgeon, which means he took care of astronauts in outer space. And he helped the state of Texas build the telemedicine program that solved the piece of legislation that demanded we treat inmates in under 24 hours. So Dr. Brooks was a pretty well-known, well-respected doctor. Everybody in the Board of Medical Examiners knew him. And I said, okay, it's time for us to go tell the Texas board what we're going to do. So we go in, and you can see I'm a guy with a little bit of passion. I like, really telling the story, and we're going to change the world. And I tell this story with Dr. Brooks sitting here, and one of the members of the board looks at me and he says, Mr. Gorton, if you build this company, you will go to prison. And Dr. Brooks, we're going to take your license and then you'll go to prison. So, I saw this little segment of my talk with what keeps you awake at night. How many entrepreneurs have the opportunity to be told your idea is going to put you in prison? It took me weeks to get Dr. Brooks up off the floor, but I did. And so we had story after story after story like this, and I'll tell you two more. Without naming the states, one of the states nearby decided that they wanted to question one of our physicians about what we were doing. And so, my position always was, whenever a state board calls us, if I called my law firm, they would say, let's lawyer up, let's go in there with all guns. And to me, that was the wrong way to do it. I felt like, okay, let's find a surgeon general or an HHS secretary, and let's go in quietly and say, this is what we're doing. This is how we can help make medicine better in your state. So the physician in question on this particular day is a former Navy captain and medical doctor. He's an Eagle Scout, soft-spoken, perfect credentials. And I'm thinking, okay, we should be able to win this. But I brought a former surgeon general, and so the three of us said, let's go early, because this is a session where they're reviewing the licenses of physicians in their state. And so we go in early, and the things I heard that morning, we were almost last on the agenda. So there was a physician who was giving out illegal drugs. There was one who had sexual misconduct. There was one who had made a bunch of mistakes and killed a few people. Every single one of those guys got their license renewed. And I went, oh, this is a no-brainer. So we tell the story, and the Surgeon General tells the story, and they said, no, we don't like this kind of medicine. You're done. We're not going to take his license away, but he can't practice telemedicine in the state anymore. So this may give it away, but the US senator from that state was a medical doctor. And so I called him and I said, can you help me here? And he said, no, they'll take my license away. So another state known for their actors hired an actor to be on their board of medical examiners. 2 days before Christmas, this patient calls into Teledoc and is crying, and he's got to have his OxyContin. His normal doctor is on vacation until after New Year's, and he's in pain, and his family's all going to be there at Christmas. He's just got the best story on the planet. It was well scripted. And just a weird coincidence. This physician was a female Navy lieutenant. She gives half of her time to the state in question, and the other half does work for the Navy. And she's pregnant, and so she decides she's going to write a prescription for ibuprofen. This particular state decided, it doesn't matter, you've written a prescription, we're going to sanction you. And so we call them, we start going in, and about our third session with this board of medical examiners, we're all sitting in, we're all under oath. And one of the members of the board says, well, our actor said, and I went, wait, patient or actor? And we're all under oath, so, you know, they have to admit it was so this board hired an actor to try and trick doctors. And so you know, me and our legal team were saying, okay, look, this is not appropriate. And they said, we don't care. In this state, we are not going to let telemedicine happen. And what the doctor did was illegal. You should never treat a patient you've never touched. So there's a word for it. Andrew, what is that word? Entrapment, is that right? So I called the, oh, I can't say the name of the newspaper, but a major newspaper that everybody in the world knows in that state. And it was a front page article 2 days later. And that board decided, maybe we should drop this. It's not really appropriate for a board of medical examiners to hire actors to try and trick doctors. So, so those were the things that kept us up at night. Those were the battles that we had to fight to get this kind of overnight success called Teledoc. But, you know, we always took the path that failure is not an option. So some of you guys know me and know I'm sort of a space nerd, and so this whole story of Apollo 13 and failure is not an option resonates with me in a very big way. But I want to go back to something else, because there's another thing that defines success in a very big way, and it's luck. So a lot of entrepreneurs won't ever say luck because they know how much hard work there is. But there's a really great UK study a couple of decades ago where a guy said, I'm going to find out why some people are lucky and why some people aren't. So he put together a group of 100 people that were lucky and 100 people that weren't lucky. And it's a, you know, if you ever want to take an hour and read something very interesting, go back and read some of the results. I'll just tell you one thing that he did. He gets these people into a study, and he gives them a newspaper, and he says, okay, I want you to count the number of pictures in this newspaper. And if you get it right, I'll give you $100. And so almost everybody who was considered themselves to be unlucky got the number right. I don't remember what it was, 47 pictures or something like that. But on the second page of this newspaper, he has a headline that says, if you report this to me, I'll give you a second $100. Almost 100% of the lucky people counted all the pictures right and said, oh, by the way, there was this headline that said, and so almost 100% of the unlucky people did not. And so afterwards, he brings the unlucky people in and he says, okay, you know, why didn't you do that? And they were split into three almost even categories. Some said, well, your assignment to me was to count the pictures, so that's what I did, period, nothing else, okay? Short-sightedness, not thinking through. Some of them said, I saw it, but I didn't believe it. And some of them didn't even see it because they had one task, right? And I can tell you, success is about broadening your mind. Don't be the dog chasing the squirrel, but look at everything around you. When there are problems, problems can become opportunities. And so, you know, with Teledoc, we didn't invent the idea of telemedicine. That idea was created in the late 60s by a guy named Dr. Jay Sanders, who had just graduated from Harvard Medical School. One of his professors was traveling back and forth. So this is in the 60s. If any of you have been in Boston, you know there's a tunnel where you can go from Harvard to Logan Airport. But back then you couldn't. You were traffic light after traffic light, and it could take an hour. And so his professor was going to Logan every single day to treat patients over there and coming back. And Dr. Sanders said, I can figure this out. So imagine the technology in the 60s that he had to use. So he's the one who really created the idea. What we did was we figured out how to solve the problem with the boards of medical examiners and put all the pieces together. And but in 2007, Teledoc celebrated its millionth member in the US Capitol building under the rotunda. Kay Bailey Hutchison was there, the Surgeon General was there, the HHS Secretary was there. And it would seem like, wow, this is success. In year 7, we celebrated our 2 millionth member, and that was 1 year later. So we grew from 1 million members to 2 million members in 1 year. Pretty extraordinary growth. We were doubling or more every single year. In fact, we even doubled in 2008. Remember the financial crisis of 2008? We lost our #1 client in 2008, and we still doubled. That's how well people were starting to resonate with this whole telemedicine concept. In 2015, we were named one of the 50 smartest companies in the world. And I love this because, you know, I went, oh, this is really cool. We were number 27. And of course, I missed the key point, but, you know, my children are like, Dad, you guys beat Microsoft and Uber and Facebook. And so, you know, success. In spite of all those successes, there were still states that were determined they were going to close this thing down. In fact, in December of 2019, 2 years ago, one of the preeminent telemedicine physicians in the world, who I knew well, called me and he said, there's a state in the South that has decided they're going to shut down telemedicine and they're going to make example of every telemedicine doctor, and I'm one of them. And I'm like, okay, Roger, what do you want me to do? And he said, whatever you did back in the Teledoc days, can you do it again? And I said, sure, I'll try. So I found the names of the board members, I called them, and they were just adamant. So now it's January. They were adamant that telemedicine is a bad thing. It's going to kill people. And I said, well, has anybody died? Because I don't know of any cases yet. No, they haven't, but somebody is going to die and we're going to stop it. It's not going to be allowed in this state. You had any malpractice? No. But so they were determined to a T, every single board member had decided they needed to end telemedicine. Two things happened. I was trying very hard to help Roger get through this process, but so this is 2019. I had left Teledoc in 2010 and kind of stayed away from the industry for a while. And everybody that I called said, Gorton, are you coming back to telemedicine? Is there something new? Is there something we should be looking at? And so I started thinking about what were the issues that remained in healthcare. And so now we're into January and February of 2020. And so people were starting to talk about this new thing called COVID. And meanwhile, I'm trying to help Roger fight this battle with the Board of Medical Examiners. And I'm starting to think about what did we accomplish and what's left. And you know, the good news for Roger is that there were, I don't know, 25, 30 or so telemedicine physicians that this particular state was going to sanction, take their licenses away, ruin their lives because they didn't believe in telemedicine. And then as COVID came in, they realized, oh, maybe telemedicine is a good thing. And that's when the barriers all fell. And the story on NPR this morning was talking about the barriers that fell. So that one that I talked about in the beginning, practicing medicine across state lines, that barrier fell during COVID. The resistance to doctors treating patients that they had never touched. You know, one of my favorite stories last year, my wife, her doctor said, "Oh, we're going to try this new thing called telemedicine. Have you ever heard of it before?" And my wife just laughs. "Yeah, I think so. Do I go to prison if you treat me?" So, but the other thing that you know, I had tried to stay away from telemedicine. I did not want to compete with the company that I created, and so, you know, I went off and did other things. But it occurred to me that the world has changed, and if you could go to the next slide. So, I called one of my another one of my co-founders at Teledoc and said, you know, maybe it's time to get back in. I think Teledoc was, you know, they were a $30 billion NYSE company at the time. And Jason Gorvick, who I hired, is still running and he's doing a great job. But I thought, you know, there are new things, new challenges, there's no way you could build this. If you build this, you'll go to prison kind of things. And so in spite of the fact that we had the ability to deliver doctors to patients nationwide, this is our 7th year stat, under 12 minutes for $35. And our doctors that worked for us made about $100,000 more working a 40-hour week than they were working as primary care practitioners working a 70-hour week. So, you know, we solved a problem on both sides of the equation, but every single person in this room, since Teledoc really started launching in 2007 or 8, every single one of us has seen double-digit increases in our healthcare costs almost every year. Why is that? Why is it that, you know, my 8-year-old son got diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia? Why is it that, you know, everybody can relate to a story like this? Why is it that my sister-in-law is fighting a stage 3 cancer battle? Why is it that my cousin found out he had heart disease when he was having his heart attack and he died? You know, are there problems that we can and should solve? And so I started putting together a business model in 2020 to, let's go to the next slide, to say, okay, what are the rest of the problems that are out there that we can use the things we learned in Teledoc to solve? And, you know, from my chair, so if you ask Jay Sanders, the guy who is considered the father of telemedicine, the guy who started back in the 60s, what is telemedicine? He'll give you a very specific answer. If you ask me, it's a very different answer. I am an engineer. I believe in efficiency. What we did was we brought efficiency to a place where efficiency almost does not exist, and that is medicine. And so to me, Teledoc was all about efficiency. The next step, the company that we're building right now, is all about efficiency. I started talking to somebody very high up at United Healthcare a few months ago. And, you know, I said, look, I think we can catch cancer before it becomes stage 1. We can catch heart disease. We can catch diabetes. All these things that are killing people and costing money, we can catch before they become significant. And the guy at United said, yeah, but that's like finding a needle in a haystack. And I thought about it for a second and I said, you're right, it is. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. And you know how you do it? One straw at a time. You know how we did it with Teledoc? We brought a magnet. Bring a magnet. That's what we need to be doing. And so we're starting to look at ways that we can go into the home and inspire people to take care of themselves and catch things before they become significant. And, you know, in many ways, this story is so different from Teledoc because, again, going back to Carrie, I'm sorry I'm picking on you today, Carrie, but in the beginning of Teledoc, it was like, nobody will fund this. How do we get through this process? And when I said, I'm going to build a new company, everybody said, can I write a check? And, you know, the idea is a great one. The technology exists today to solve these problems. And some of you may realize, you know, we have the ability to catch almost everything. It is expensive right now. Our job is to find ways to make it more efficient and inspire. The other side of it is some people may know that they can do things that keep themselves healthy, but they won't do it anyway. And so our goal is to find the ones that will and help them. Everybody's using telemedicine now. In the beginning, nobody got it. Now everybody does. So we'll see that same kind of transition. But as we implement the things that make people healthier, we're going to accomplish something else. And that is, we are probably 10 years away from taking a phrase, which is sort of a fun phrase people say right now, and turning it into a whole new reality. So the fun phrase that people say right now is 60 is the new 40. All right. So yeah, you know, like we're having fun. But those of us who are 60 don't look like we did when we were 40. But we are 10 years away from actually having that for people that are willing to pull the levers. And there's probably somewhere between 20 and 30 things that if you do on a regular basis, when you are 100 years old, you will look and feel like you did when you were 40. And so that is one of the things that we're also going to do in this new company is we're going to say, okay, what are the buttons that we have to press to inspire the immune system so that you stay strong, and inspire the immune system so that you have longevity. And, you know, I don't know how we get past the Hayflick limit yet, which is the 120 at the end of your telomere replication. But I think, again, we're 10 years away, and the preeminent longevity institute in the world, people don't know this, is right here in town. It's the Gladden Longevity Institute. Jeff Gladden, who started it, is probably the best longevity physician in the world. And, you know, I've been working really hard to make friends with the guy, but, you know, it's right here. And so I think just like Teledoc was born here, I think there's going to be a whole new generation of what we're now calling digital health and longevity right here in North Texas. And so success, North Dallas. Again, thank you very much, everybody. I very much appreciate it.
Empowering for the future, empowering for change, and empowering us. I so appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Got a few minutes for some questions. Anyone have a question?
Yeah, Tom.
This is Tom Meyer. Tom Meyer is also known as the man who asked the first question.
Yeah.
Tom, and no dissertations.
So I like the comment about time in terms of helping the doctors go from working 1 hours to 40 hours.
Mhm.
I like the whole concept of success. The cost of success quite often is time.
Correct.
I've heard many statements made that if you're an entrepreneur, you can't live a balanced life.
Mhm.
I've also heard that in the Fortune 500 world. So what are your comments about, can entrepreneurs live a balanced life and be successful?
Right. So can entrepreneurs live a balanced life and be successful? Yeah, so I think the answer is yes. You know, I worked as an engineer. I went to law school at night. I was working for the big power company in the state of Texas. And I decided to become an entrepreneur. And I realized about a year into it that I hadn't gone to work since I left the power company. So, you know, passion is really what being an entrepreneur is all about. I'm not working anymore. I'm having fun. And I can tell you, I know a bunch of you in this audience have done things that have changed the world. And that is a drug. What was that song? I want a new drug, one that makes me feel like I feel when I'm changing the world. So that's entrepreneurism. So I'm not working. My wife's an entrepreneur like me, and we find time and we have fun. So thanks for that question, Tom.
Awesome. Please.
Politicization, everything is politics now, medicine in particular.
Yeah.
Especially with COVID. I went back and read the studies of the people who have died of COVID. Over 90%, for example, were vitamin D deficient.
Right.
What I have found though is every social media outlet that I can go to, shadow ban the post. If I mention, please take vitamin D to boost your immune system. Please take, zinc.
Mm-hmm.
Where's it in those sorts of things? If we can't get those messages out, how can we get the message you want about strengthen the immune system rather than treat it?
Right.
So getting the message out.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah. So it was hard in the beginning of Teledoc to get the message out. When we finally did our press release in 2005, I actually wanted to fire the PR firm. I had just asked my marketing guy to leave the company. The PR firm that he had hired, I wanted to fire. And in May of 2005, I couldn't because their contract was too strong. In May of 2005, they did our press release. In January of 17, I said, I give. We had been on 600 major newspaper, magazine. The View talked about us. I had been on every major talk show in the news. So the controversy is what made the message get out. And the great news is, I don't even know how many speeches and podcasts and things I've done in the last year, but it's a lot. We're riding on a tidal wave right now. It's going to end. But I think there was something else in your question, which is really more about, are we allowing politics to control our science and our medicine? And that's a much more fundamental question. Saying to an entrepreneur, if you build this company, you're going to go to prison is very, very similar to that. I'm not afraid of it, but there's a lot of education that has to happen. It is true that the scientists will tell you if you're doing zinc and vitamin D, your probability of having a bad case of COVID is a lot lower. Now, why is our healthcare system not telling us that? I don't know the answer to that question. There's no money in it. Follow the money. I didn't want to put my tinfoil hat on, but follow the money is always a good answer.
I just want to say, I don't have a question, but I want to let you know that, so you have about 400,000 of my customers that have met you for the last 5-6 years. And I can tell you 3 of them that we know firsthand that you've actually saved their lives. And one of them is the first step. So I don't have a question for it, but I just want to thank you for it.
Here, here.
Stuff you've gone through, you only hear the bad things. And it's sometimes really reassuring and good to hear that there are some good things in people you've helped. And that's something that we've never taken of. So thank you.
Wow, thank you
This
very much.
gentleman runs one of the largest health insurance companies in the US, Affordicare. with very large, and to hear that from you says a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we have time for one last question. I have it. Tell me about the book that you've written.
Ah,
Well,
Well,
tell them how they can get it,
okay,
because it is a fascinating book.
yeah. Well, I wish I could follow the Jeff Crilly method of selling books. That man knows how to sell a book. Right after coming off of Kilimanjaro, it occurred to me that the way entrepreneurs look at the world and the way investors look at the world is very different. And entrepreneurs will do anything and everything to solve the problems and get their companies built. When they get good enough, venture capital will come in and take them through a grueling due diligence process. And the best of the best get funded. 70% of those that get funded fail. Why? That was the topic that I wanted to address in this book that I wrote called Broken Handoff. And my publisher's in the room. There he is, right there, Brown Books. So this is really funny because I started writing the book alone, and Brown decided to publish it. And I called Tom and Millie Brown and said, I'm going to bring in 2 co-authors. And Millie was like, no, you're not. Yes, I am. I don't know how I lived through that day. And it turns out she's right.
You don't tell Millie.
And no, you don't tell me. Yeah, that's right. So the book is a lot of the stories of Teledoc, but it's also, it started out as kind of a one-sided story, you know, the entrepreneur side. But the reality is there is a fix to this. And it's a multi-trillion-dollar problem. Annually, that 70% of companies that get funded fail, 70% of M&A transactions fail. How do you fix that? What's the difference between the funding side and the entrepreneur side? And so that's what we talked about. So a lot of the stories of Teledoc are in there, along with how do you fix it? Thank you.
Venture vultures don't know how to run a company. An entrepreneurial company. Okay, I saw a hand back here. Who was, please? And then,
Similar to this, John, but as a recent cancer survivor, I threw myself into a lot of research about treatment, alternative treatments that actually work.
Yeah.
But the FDA puts the kibosh on all that. There's so many other things that we can do to survive and get healthy and stay healthy. And I believe, someone over here said it, it's all about the money. There is no money in curing cancer. It is so frustrating. It's something that obviously we're passionate about, but I don't know that there's ever, even the work you're doing, I just don't know that there's ever going to be an insight to this.
Yeah. So our belief is that the number one piece of medicine is something that we ignore. The strongest treatment for just about everything will come from our own immune system. And we are not doing the things to inspire our immune system to stop it from happening in the first place. And so, you know, every one of us today has cancer in our body, and our immune system is figuring it out. But if you're under a lot of stress, or, you know, something happens to you and that cancer gets the upper edge, then it's multiplying so fast. So how do we not get there? That's the real question. Mom was right when she said, because I know we all had the same mom in this room. She said an ounce of prevention is worth, you know, the rest of it. And listen, that is so true. If we can prevent it in the first place, we can stop it from getting bad. And that's actually, so that right to the point, that's what my company, Recuro. By the way, my LinkedIn profile and email address are up there. Please take a picture of that. And, you know, we're always looking for resources and ways we can help. And so, you know,
He does respond.
I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Gorton.
thank you, sir.
Michael, step here a second.
All right.
A couple of things. This book was given to me by Colleen Barrett, the president of Southwest Airlines. When she retired, she gave it to the whole board. It was the first time I received it. And it's by Lee Colton, one of our members. And it's a beautiful coffee table book in the nature of excellence. And I think that too describes the work that you've done. And breakfast for two at the White, and dinner for two at the Dwyers.
Oh, nice.
And for your lovely wife, picking you out of bed very, very early to get you here. And I know the story, you and I did a massage or a facial transplant.
Okay, awesome. Wow.
Wow. Take care, my friend.